Chapter 39. A Panic at Rink. Joe looked back over his shoulder at Bob, then at Tommy about to take the draw. Tommy, what about our coach? Arthur on right wing added, Yeah, Tommy, even if Harman's going home sick, shouldn't we check with a new guy first? Arthur leaned in for the face-off and heard Tommy say to himself, or maybe it was for his teammates' ears as well, Yeah, doesn't matter which usher I get in the movies, neither. Tommy both heard the syncopated bash to throttle any and all hesitation into oblivion and felt the building merry rage of Led Zeppelin's rock and roll as it started up in his head. He cracked the puck off the face-off dot before the other center was able to be sure the ref had dropped it. Joe Lennox cupped the puck on his stick and chugged hard down the wing, head up, daring the defense to stop him. The first Cheltenham defenseman went for a high percentage play and lost. Joe was crossing the blue line on the left side when the rangy defenseman dove at the puck, arms and stick extended, along with his body, sweeping Joe's corridor to the net with a 10-foot-wide sliding detour. With the tip of his stick, Joe flipped the puck over the top of the stretched-out defender and followed it, raising both his heels to the back of his pants as he jumped. He came down alone, picking up more speed with his leap and his landing strides. Joe discovered he was in the middle of the slot with the puck on his stick, only the goaltender in front of him. He snapped a shot up high that beat the goalie stick side. Rink exploded with whoops and a mass of shouts that made it sound like Cheltenham was a team of only orphans. Its supporters had applauded respectfully after each of their kids' goals. Riverview was on the board, down 3-1, with almost a whole period to play. Jerry, I can't believe you're here, and Harman's not, Charles said, at last reacting to what he felt upon seeing his friend beside him. It's all topsy-turvy now. Charles looked up to the new man in charge, seeking a signal to take the ice with his line. But the new man wasn't in charge. Bob looked back at Charles and gave him a curt dip of the chin, and no instructions. Charles looked back at Jerry. Charles, just do what you always do, and it'll be all right. You'll see, said Jerry. He hesitated, then added, Burn bright, Cannonball. Burn as bright as you can. Charles, Walsh, and Jack and two more defensemen jumped over the boards, giving Tommy and the boys a short shift. The way that they had started, the more energy they had, maybe the more goals they would score. That's it! That's it! That's the ticket, said Bob, clapping his hands. Keep the lines moving! Oof! Bob felt a sharp tug on his pant leg, making him stagger and fall. He came down on both knees on top of Tiny Jim's platform. Next he felt a claw on his shoulder that swung him around. He was face to face with his brother. Rob was seething, but he was confused too, which was the only thing that prevented him from strangling Bob with his own bright tie. What's going on, Bobby? What's this game you're playing? Tiny Jim answered for his new coach. He couldn't help himself. Game's hockey, Mr. Lakeman, and Coach Harman's gone home sick. Jim turned back to the ice to watch the game be played. Jerry was standing in the middle of the bench and did not see his dad clutching his squatting uncle. Jerry's focus was on Walsh and Jack, who were down in the Cheltenham end battering defensemen senseless. It was as if the air in Rink was being pumped full of adrenaline, and Riverview was siphoning it up with every breath. And where's Harman? Said Rob, instantly knowing a wordless answer to that and to his first demand of just what game it was Bob was playing. Thought you weren't coming tonight, like you never do, Rob added under his breath. And now this. When Bob had called the night before, very late, he had first asked what time the game would start, then promised to try to show up, for Jerry's sake, just as he'd done dozens of times before. They stared at each other, each of them unsure that the other was not somehow in the right. Jerry watched the action more intently, not hearing Tiny Jim when he meekly called out for him. Then gave up when the red goal light at the other end of the rink came on for the second time that period. Jim jumped from his spot to join the celebration, happening all around Jerry, after Martin rifled a blast from the right point to bring the Voyagers up to 3-2. Rob, you don't know what Jerry went through, just to be able to sit there right now." He squeezed the shoulder of Rob's jacket until he could feel his collarbone. Rob wondered what Jerry had went through. He thought he had known, but the way Bob said it, it felt like there was something more. Letting go of Bob's sleeve, he said, "You just be sure he keeps on sitting there. I mean it." "That's the plan. That's the plan. Don't worry about a thing," Bob said, brushing down his clothes and standing back up. He gave Rob another double thumbs up and the sweepstakes winning grin. It was hardly the way the season had started, but Rob was certain that demanding his son stay stuck to the bench was the correct way to end it up. It had been quite a year. He ambled back around to Jill, waiting for him to return to the other side of the rink. "Jerry, good luck charm," Charles said, rocking Jerry's torso with a headlock. Tommy just gave Jerry a look in the face as if to say, "Where have you been?" Jerry's hopes were once fallen angels rising all around him. He whispered, "If I could only play," in one angel's ear, and heard a whisper back. He crept over to Uncle Bob. Bob hunched down and Jerry spoke first, just as Charles took the face off and play resumed with bodies crashing. "How'd you do it? Where's the coach? What'd you do with him?" Jerry's eyes registered wonder, his voice laced with concern. Not changing his buoyant expression, Bob shifted his sights to the ice. He swung his head back down to face Jerry. "I can't divulge all of my secrets, Jerry," said Bob. "It's part of the code." "Code? Code?" "Spy's code. You know." "Oh my gosh," Jerry thought in a panic. "Maybe Bob is an agent. Maybe he's like a hitman too, licensed to kill." Trusting Bob wasn't that crazy. He chose to ask a strictly technical question. "Well, how'd you get my equipment out the car?" The crowd peaked, fell, then peaked again, all the louder as Walsh was smeared into the chicken wire with a high hit in the corner. The pesky forward caught by a defenseman for a change. "Get into the car?" Bob said, frowning with his mouth, smiling brighter than he had before with his eyes. He leant down even lower to face Jerry standing at the end of the bench below him. "You don't give me enough credit, Jerry. That's what we do. Open doors, pretend to be other people, haul in the bad guys. And sometimes, in very special cases, duties can even include inconveniencing a coach. He's okay. Don't worry. We'll bring him back. We'll bring him back. When we're all done." Bob stood back up and hollered at the boys, "Don't stop now!" Jerry went and sat back on the edge of the bench, the question he didn't ask still trapped in his head. He felt happier to be on the bench than at any time since he first saw Harman scratch his name onto the roster. Bob's done enough, he thought, shoving the urge to play out to arm's length. The Voyager's first blush of fire having consumed the peculiar fuel of Jerry's return, the game now settled into a tug of war, and Riverview almost let go of the rope. Their bench fell as silent as the room containing only Harman right over their heads, when Flaherty glided straight into the slot and like Wyatt Earp facing a six-gun duel, he flung up his hand to make a glove save on a breakaway. With the minutes ticking down, the mood on the Riverview bench was falling under the shadow of a swelling wave of finality. Jerry looked up at the familiar haphazard squall of light bulbs making up the game clock above the corner of the rink to his right. How fast time had trampled over him in his last gasp of Bantam's life, his unexpected, though still neatly plotted, afterlife to the season. "What was that?" Jerry said this out loud. His shoulders flinched high, the pads rising up to his ears, which were alerted by a crash in the floorboards above him. He looked up at the tar-black base of the old press box that overhung their bench. He could hear nothing more. He turned to Tiny Jim still sitting at Bob's feet. Jim looked back at Jerry, then at the blackened base of the long-ignored appendage to the wall of the rink above them. "You hear that?" Jerry called out to him. The play was staccato on the ice, up and down the rink. The spectators, players, coaches, and Bob, too, clung to every turn of the puck. "Rats, man!" Jim hollered back at Jerry, the crowd noise rising to a rumble. Jim pointed his nose up at the defunct press box, adding, "And big ones." Riley stuck a poke check into a Cheltenham rush, deflating the threat at his blue line. It was 15:07 of the third period, then 15:08, 15:09. "Damn, man! That wasn't no rat! It's the roof falling in!" Jim shouted, springing up to stand at Bob's elbow. "Stop 'em, man! Stop 'em!" Riley's poke check had seen the puck carom off a skate and bobble right back in his direction. At first savoring the thrill of his skilled defensive maneuver, Riley's next move was to fall flat on his pants. Flaherty was facing another breakaway. Jerry felt helpless as he watched Cheltenham's crouched center close in on the net. But a stronger feeling took him over. It was the feeling that helpless was not something he wanted to be. "Stop it!" he screamed from below his stomach up to the roof of his mouth. The second in time fragmented into single frames of a slow-motion movie, the pictures not running together, but shown one at a time. Jerry tensed. Next to him, Monahan wailed something that was not a word right into his left ear. He wanted to shut his eyes, and didn't, when Flaherty slumped down, slinging his glove over his head. "Save!" Tiny Jim bawled, jubilation sprouting from his head like instant antlers. The puck disappeared, with Cheltenham's late insurance goal scoring bid snug in the webbing of Flaherty's catching glove. Harman saw it all. He had nearly knocked himself unconscious when, with his ankles just about wriggled free of the tape, he tipped the chair he was fastened to over to the floor. The metal-backed base added to the mighty fall, cracking the side of his head on the floor. But the surprisingly solid impact was also sufficient to break the tall back of the aged, bug-eaten, and brittle piece of forgotten furniture. Like Marley's ghost dragging his chains, Harman, twined up in a mess of wood shards, steely handcuffs, and twisting duct tape, clattered his way to the windows to the rink, leaning on the desk beneath them for support, and watched Flaherty make as big a save as he'd ever seen as coach. He squirmed in his snare. "Boys, all I'm going to ask you to do is one thing," Bob said. Most voyagers pressed themselves to the boards out in front of the bench. Every one of them but Jerry, including Tiny Jim, had stormed the ice to swarm Flaherty after he had made the save they'd all take to their graves, win or lose. The referee never thought to hand out a penalty. "Can't guess what that thing's going to be," Tommy thought back at Bob. "Win it, right?" He already knew the answer. No questions asked. All through his head, a beat vibrated, as if strummed on a bass guitar tall as a western sequoia tree. Music echoed and boiled off the surface of a dark, lost lake, thundering down from a dusk-dimmed mountainside, come alive with Marshall amps. The LP of Tommy's mind whirled the intro to Black Sabbath's N.I.B. He hummed gently to the imagined tune. "Just look up there." Bob stuck out his right arm, hand and forefinger lighting up the scoreboard. No one had any trouble reading it. "Visitors 3, home 2, period 3. Clock says 16:43, announced Jerry. "And don't tell me what you see," Bob continued. "You show yourselves. You show everybody what it is you want to see looking back at you." Bob poked his hands in his pockets. Tommy crouched over the face-off dot to the right of Flaherty. Amped too high, he pulled the draw back too strong. The puck went right to where he would not have preferred to have it go, right at his own net. Flaherty kicked it out to the blue line. "Win the face-off. Don't lose the game," Tommy said to himself out loud, hurtling out of the zone after the puck. Arthur laughed, skating beside him. Laugh though he did, Arthur was as strained as he'd ever felt playing hockey. His stressed expression was daubed across his face as if it was paint applied with a roller. Both the Cheltenham and Voyagers' benches rose all at once. Tommy had whisked the puck off a Cheltenham stick like he was recovering a stolen family heirloom. Ice chips shot from his skates. His burst was fed as much by his horror of almost scoring on his own net as it was for wanting to make a play. Tommy crossed the blue line and tore into the left face-off circle well ahead of his line mates. Both defensemen were on him. All of his efforts, all his spirit poured down through his legs, down through his arms, hands, down to the puck on his stick. His head was down too. He got hit. First by one defenseman, flush on. Next by a back-checking wing. Jerry thought he saw Tommy's stick flick up and forward somewhere in the jumble, maybe at the start of the sticks, gloves, and body pastiche of the collision. The red light went on behind the net. A roar fell upon the rink. Cheltenham's goalie never moved. He was never set. He never saw Tommy shoot. Reacting now, in a rage, the goalie fished the puck from the cage in back of him, fired it all the way down the ice. Flaherty kicked it at center ice, making it skitter off to where Jerry's parents stood with Mr. Zloty. Flaherty was a hawk on the play. He saw Tommy shoot from center ice. He knew he would shoot as soon as he saw him steal the puck. Flaherty came out of his cage to celebrate the tying goal before it had entered the net. Mr. Zloty doubled up over the boards. He was tall, so he just about was able to reach down and grab the puck off the ice, despite having to extend himself not only over the boards, but to get out over his epic pot belly. He groaned bearishly as he came back up, his face wearing a beet's tan. Tommy fought through his teammates' hugs and mauling. A little bit bewildered, he roamed to center ice, over to the boards where his father was standing. Guided to his dad without thinking to go to him, he followed the beacon-like puck Mr. Zloty waved like a prize over his head. "I'm saving this one, kid," he bellowed. "Now go get another!" "Dad, be cool. It's only tied." Tommy wheezed, short of breath, from the excitement and from his jet-like sprint to the net. Only Tommy was not cool. The goal had tripped a wire in his mind, ramped up a dread of the unknown that was fast breathing hard inside of him. Now what? He thought. Now what? Tommy's feet were light as cotton balls, and so was his head. His 3-3 goal had stopped the clock at 16:55. Regardless of the fact that the derelict timekeeping apparatus appeared to glare the 4-digit number of a year to set a space-age science fiction movie in, rather than determine how much time was left in a hockey game down on Earth. "How much time have we got?" Bob asked down to Tiny Jim, who just shrugged and said, "A little, man, a little." Cleo was on top of it. "The time of the goal is 16... He repeated it, saying the words fast before any more static interrupted his official proclamation over the conking out public address. "Clock says 16:55, Riverview goal scored by Tom Zlot." He'd mispronounced Tommy's name since he was a mite. 16:55. Oh, damn. That's... Oh, damn. Snapping off the crying machine, Cleo felt beneath the desk for a bag of tools he kept there for just such a time as this. "It's getting worse. It makes my ears ring," Cleo said to Cheltenham's scorekeeper, who was keeping the team's books in the chair next to his own. Cleo put a finger in his right ear and wagged it. "I'll fix that damn thing once and for all, before we all go deaf," he said to the end of the switched-off microphone, like he was making it a promise. "Don't get tight, boys," Bob told them all on the bench, his words aimed at the backs of the next Riverview unit to take fate by its ragged mane. Green, Monahan, and Martin, as ever in Jerry's place, went out at forward, and Vazzo and Donnie Dunn were on defense. Tommy sat next to Charles on the bench, and Tommy was tighter than a soldered bolt. "I hate this crap," he told Charles. "Feels like I can't breathe. Yeah, it's all on the line, and all of a sudden I'm going pussy or something." "What'll I do, Ball? What'll I do?" Charles looked Tommy up and down, put his hand on his shoulder, giving it a gentle push, smiling unusually with hardened eyes. "That's what coaches are for. Let's ask him," Charles said, making Tommy breathe all the harder. Mr. Coach Bob," Charles said, raising his voice to the end of the bench, causing Bob to lean towards him immediately and cup his ear. Again, Charles patted Tommy's shoulder, got up from the bench, and strode over to Bob. "Mr. Coach Bob, Tommy's getting kind of uptight," Charles said, as Tommy's eyes bulged at the play. Sticks snapped on the face-off. The puck hopped over to Green. He stepped over the red line and crammed it all the way down into the Cheltenham end. Monahan and Martin chased it at full clip, with the time climbing to 17 minutes, 17:01, 17:02. "Tommy's getting kind of uptight, and well, he's our guy," Charles said to Bob, "and he's got so much pressure on him." Bob was sitting on his heels, knelt down beside Tiny Jim. Charles spoke behind his raised glove, but Tommy could hear him clearly. "You think you can help Tommy out? Talk to him a little. Settle him down? We really need for him to be okay." Monahan missed with a reckless check on the defenseman as he came out from behind his net with the puck and went spilling into the left corner. Martin was the second man in. He kept charging. The defenseman just accelerated into the face-off circle, looking to make an outlet pass. Martin took a chance and went for the defenseman too, and he missed the check even more calamitously than his teammate, tripping over his slippery opponent's stick and sliding straight into Monahan. They both hit the deck together this time. The crowd was up and pressing to the rink itself. Cheltenham and Riverview backers alike crunched in as close as the people next to and in front of them would allow. Tommy, Bob called out to him. "Soon as we get a whistle, get out there, okay?" Tommy nodded, without looking back at Bob, jiggling his knees, leaning forward, poised to get up. He could no longer hear any music. The rock was not rolling. His private stereo had gone dead. "Best thing for him, to get right back out there," Bob said to Charles, adding, "Do you think he heard me?" Charles said, "I doubt it. He's still in space. I'll tell him again, to make sure." Charles shuttled down the bench to relay Bob's command, his first as stand-in coach, just in case it did not sink in with Riverview's high-strung high scorer. Squeezing by players and watching the play, as did everyone on the bench with spiking trepidation, Charles walked back to his place next to Tommy. Monahan and Martin scraped the water from the ice with frantic strides, straining to get back into the play. Cheltenham was rushing the puck through center ice, Vazzo and Dunn in front of them, backs to their blue line. Green back-checked, swiping at the puck carrier, but he could not stop him. Vazzo and Dunn began to pinch, but it was too late to stop the formation of a juggernaut 4-on-2. Dunn poked at the puck, dangling on his opponent's stick a yard in front of him. The cavalry of Monahan and Martin were 3 strides from catching up with the play. The rush swept in over the blue line. Charles stopped and stood 1 step from Tommy. His attention was welded to the ice. Cheltenham's puck carrier dropped a pass for a trailing attacker, and he fired it. The shot glanced off the crossbar, hit the chicken wire behind the cage, and fell flat behind it. Play continued in the Voyager's end. Charles swallowed hard and stayed put. He'd tell Tommy after the whistle. But it didn't matter that Charles tell Tommy anything, not when Bob was doing his job for him, and with Tommy suddenly listening. "Tommy, don't forget," Bob blurted over the top of the bench. "You get out there!" Tommy jumped over the boards. Focused on the play absolutely, Tommy's mental state meanly mimicked an autistic fascination with living detail. And the only detail that enthralled him was the skittering, hypnotic course of the puck. That was it. That was everything. And it did not include such factors as the count of his teammates that were already out there on the ice, or what his coach was telling him. Tommy had no idea, that he was not replacing someone already back on the bench, as he swooped in to clap the puck from a Cheltenham player's stick. No clue that he was the Voyagers' sixth skater, not including Flaherty, chopping over the ice. And no ability to know that Bob had not finished his sentence. Charles's mouth still sagged agape from shouting, "No!" at Tommy's back to no avail when the whistle blew. There were 2 minutes and 33 seconds left in regulation time. Riverview would spend 2 minutes of it playing a man down. The score tied 3-3. Tommy came to his senses with the call, not too much to his surprise, for too many men on the ice. It was not unlike waking from a catnap at noon. "Oh my God! I'll sit it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, guys. I screwed up," he said to Bob and his teammates at the bench before skating to the box. "What the hell? Thought you just sent me out. I didn't know what was happening. I heard you call me. I spaced, really spaced bad. I'm sorry. I'll get it back. I'll get it together now, fellas. I'm sorry. Tommy ground his teeth beneath closed lips. His eyes remained as glazed as when he had jumped over the boards. "Let's just kill this off, guys. That's the whole game right there. Just kill this off," Bob said, warming up to his cameo role. His first huge blunder in the bag. "Real steady. No mistakes," he added, then shouted calmly to Tommy heading for the box. "And Tommy, soon as the penalty's up, you get right back here to the bench, okay?" He turned back to the bench, continuing, "And let's put a defenseman out there as soon as he does. You guys got it? We'll hold tight. We can play overtime." Pivoting back to Tommy, Bob again shouted after him, "No problem, right, Tommy? You got it. Right back here when the penalty's up. We'll get a defenseman on, Tommy. Sure you're okay now? Sure you got that, Tommy? Sure you got that?" Bob held Tommy's eye, and his stare was so glazed that Bob felt as if his own eyes had gone out of focus. Tommy mouthed that he'd got it, and went into the penalty box thinking, Overtime? I'd rather be playing a goal down." Tommy was the best Riverview had, but he was wrapped far too tight for tight games. He'd never grow up to be a money player. He couldn't believe what he'd done. He'd get hold of himself, straighten himself out for the overtime panic. Unwinding for a couple of ticks in the box, it makes sense. This he told himself within the non-musical clattering storm inside of his head. Flaherty scrambled 1-2 shots. The rebound, the bad one, came right at him. Sharp on the power play, Cheltenham was grabbing for the prone throat of the game. The first shot let go from the top of the slot. At a single-digit angle, Flaherty flopped to smother it with his pads. He didn't. Rebound lost in front of him. In a spasm, he flung his blocker up over his right shoulder, all but losing his stick. Plunk! The second shot hit him square in the thin mask. The dingy lights in the building took on a shimmer. The sounds around his net became a bit louder to his ear. Through a faint, barely perceptible pinwheel superimposed on the rink in front of him, he saw Jack clear the puck out to center ice. "You all right? Get you in the head?" Riley called behind him to his goalie as he skated out of the zone. "I'm good. Enough," Flaherty said, not lying, his initial daze wearing off at once. Charles beat everyone to the puck up at the Cheltenham blue line. He gave it all his legs ever had and went for the cage 2 defensemen to beat. Charles cut to go around them, and the left defenseman went for him. Charles shifted to the middle. Head faking still to the outside, he split the pair like he was bisecting a cantaloupe with a sword. 10 feet in front of the net, he shot. His short-handed bid ended with the goalie beat to shreds, the puck clanking off the right post. The old building heaved. The crowd would not have sounded any louder if the stands were completely full up and Rip Rink twice its size. Charles's sister Kate was packed in, standing next to the goal judge at the end where her brother took the shot, with her best friend on the other side of her. The goal judge's finger twitched, and Kate sucked in her lips when the puck bounced off the post. A shrill scream entered her ear. That this was the championship game, with time so much a factor now, and with it not possible for most to read the clock, even Cleo, truth be told, did not concern Cleo. He kept what he called double-entry books. As official timekeeper, he had an actual to-the-second reliable timepiece on the table in front of him. That was the official timepiece of the official timekeeper. The abstract panel of tiny light bulbs up on the wall? It was only there to comfort the public. Excuse me, would you please take care of the 2 clocks, just for a minute, Cleo said to Cheltenham's scorekeeper sitting beside him. We're going to really need this PA working right for the award ceremony. I'll just be a bit. His out-of-town partner, obliging, pulled his chair close to the controls of the multi-button panel of the electric scoreboard, and picked up the simpler one-button control of the wind-up clock. Cleo's official timepiece, an enormous silver stopwatch. When Cleo, long screwdriver sprouting from his palm, vanished below, burrowing into the warren of wires and plugs infesting the space underneath the desk, his timekeeping companion did wonder whether Cleo's just be a bit may exceed the time remaining in the game. Out on the ice, Cheltenham was making Riverview pay for Charles nailing the post and not the net. Its power play organized now, Cheltenham closed down on Flaherty with what felt to the defenders like the inevitability of sundown. A shot pegged Flaherty in the pads. The rebound slid all the way out to the right point. And whack! The next shot came in low. The puck tipped straight up. Flaherty grabbed it with his glove and held tight, teetering over to the ice with players crashing in front and then above him. Cheltenham's scorekeeper pressed the stopwatch button as the ref blew the play dead, just as Flaherty's stop had kept Riverview alive. The arrow froze unmistakably at 18 minutes and 50 seconds, 1 minute and 10 seconds to go in regulation time. Cleo popped up from under the desk, red-faced, sweating, and looking happy as a glutton whose belly was filled with a freshly swallowed feast. All fixed, he said, taking back his seat. Snapping the black pellet of a switch to turn the mic back on, Cleo looked at the paper in front of him and belatedly read off Tommy's penalty in time. No sound traveled any further than where he sat. The mic was dead. With the time evaporating on Tommy's penalty, the boys began to pepper Bob with looks. Who should go out? Joe even asked him, with one leg already over the boards. Bob flung Jerry a look, and Jerry said to Joe, You guys are doing okay. You guys are doing okay, changing up all on your own. Just get some new guys out there. Finish killing the penalty. Finish killing the penalty. Jerry felt a small glow. He was not only on the bench and dressed, but in his own way, taking part in the game. You got it, said Charles, alive with his near goal, but out of breath from his shift and looking for a rapid change. Come on, Joe. Fisher cut bait. I'll cut bait, Sonny said as he burst over the boards, calling back to the bench. Or maybe I'll just fish up a goal. Jack, let's go. Jack and Walsh, Vazzo and Martin trundled out for the face-off. Just wanted to know, that's all, said Joe, who sat back down, not bothered. Jerry thought about Tommy's philosophy on coaches that he talked about back at the pond, agreeing all the way with one part of it at least. Bob's miracle aside, the bench might now be needing an experienced traffic cop. Jack axed the puck out over the Riverview blue line as soon as it touched his stick, but Cheltenham corralled it at center ice and came storming right back in on goal. Tommy stood up in the box. Hey! How much time's left of my penalty? How much time? He shouted into the time and scorekeeper's booth. It was separated from the box only by a wall of metal wire and wood frame, so it was like he was shouting from inside of it. Hey, how much time? Where's Cleo? Tommy hollered even louder, causing the Cheltenham scorekeeper to turn away. Martin rode a guy into the corner and fought for the puck, all elbows, gloves, and knees. Tommy looked up at the clock, but could only see a rink hieroglyphic of busted bulbs. What he could not see was that there were only a few more moments more than 1 minute to play in regulation time. Vaso sliced the puck up the boards and just got it out. "Keep it out!" Jerry railed from back on the bench. He shook his stick in one hand like a scepter. Cleo materialized from under the table. "That time I got it," he told his Cheltenham company, pushing his must-white hair from his face. "That time I got it." "When am I out, Mr. Glide? Mr. Glide! Gotta tell me! Hey!" Tommy yelled. "When am I out?" Cleo waved an all-will-be-well gesture at Tommy with his left hand, said, "Just a sec," and took urgent hold of the microphone with his right. Already seconds late for his cue, Cleo cleared his throat to announce that there was about 1 minute to play in the third period. He clicked the microphone switch to on, and the rink was instantly stricken with an oral squall, a cascading curtain of electric gravel and sand. Worse still, it would not stop. A shudder rolled through the uninterrupted action on the ice, the way a single-second spike of broadcast interference jars the figures on the screen when watching a game on TV. At the back of a row of bleachers, a little child pulled her stretchy white hat down over her ears, then covered her whole head with it and crouched in her seat. Cleo wrestled with the mic, flipping it on, off. The 7 hefty speakers perched about the rink wailed on undeterred. Referee and 2 linesmen each resembled the same monkey of the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil clan. All held hands to their ears, skating right along with the play, which, like the din, would not stop. The ref uncapped his ears quickly, with the linesman looking hard at him. The pair was searching the man with the red armbands, if not for any evil, then certainly for something spoken. "Keep it going, Reg!" the first linesman hollered, rolling his hand in a circle to indicate what he meant. Sign language necessitating, he leave an eardrum bare. Holding his whistle up as a totem, the ref motioned to carry on. He was secure in his ability, with just one hard blow of his blessed whistle, to outdo the devil's own tone flooding the rink. Sonny steered the puck into the Cheltenham end, and Jack chased it down, immune to the strains of the unholy noise. Not everyone else, players and non-players alike, could say the same. The tune, without melody, was a high-pitched serenade to first kill off the living and then raise the dead. Steel razors strummed at barbed wire strings of a plugged-in hell's harp, and the band played on. "Stop the clock already!" Cheltenham's mustachioed coach demanded. "I mean, what the hell is this? A duck and goddamn cover drill?" He picked up his own missile and reeled back to throw a water bottle onto the ice. But he did not follow through when he next saw that his best players were on the rush, through center ice, and were crossing the Riverview blue line. A shot, and Flaherty deflected the puck to the corner. Tommy had 7 seconds left to serve. He couldn't know that, though. Cleo, hopping up and down from his seat to the cable and wires beneath the desk, was too busy to signal him. Tommy shouted as loud as he could on over to Bob at the bench, just beyond where Cleo struggled to stop the biting squeal from the PA. Bob and Tiny Jim looked back at Tommy and held out their hands, what-to-do style. They couldn't hear each other, although Tommy saw Bob calling out to him, tomato-faced. He was screaming his head off, swinging his arms, yet all Tommy saw was a parody of a silent film. He slammed his stick into the floorboards. "Damn it! Damn it!" he screamed, unable to hear himself, only feeling the vibrations in his throat. A big-chested pigeon dropped 2 feathers into the penalty box. Flushed from a hidden nest behind the speaker above it, the bird hovered wildly over the madly vibrating object. Batting its wings, it looked as if it was trying to smother the sound. The Cheltenham scorekeeper picked up the stopwatch, fumbled it, and dropped it on the concrete floor. There was a stirring under the table. Cleo emerged with the silver stopwatch in hand. It was precisely 19:30 of the third period. It still ticked. Tommy was 3 seconds late, now 4, 5 and counting. Cleo pointed at Tommy like he was shooting him over and over with a toy gun. Tommy couldn't hear him yell, "Go!" But he didn't have to. He was gone. "Get a defenseman out there, now! Now!" Tommy screamed at his teammates. He could not make his voice any louder. His throat hurt. He was standing dead center in front of the Riverview bench. No one moved. Bob's face was blank. "You're already out there. You get out there," Martin said, rising but standing still. He added, "You mean me, Tommy?" "Come on!" Tommy screamed into nothingness in front of him. "Come on!" There was an echoing pop from all 7 speakers, and the noise switched to something like a turbo engine melting down. Cheltenham's top scorer broke in tight, leaned hard to his right, and fired on goal. Flaherty's stick save sent the puck spinning off unexpectedly to his left. It hit the boards in front of the Riverview bench without a sound and dropped lifeless behind Tommy's leaping skates. Jumping the boards to force the change now, Tommy fell on top of Martin in a heap. Alone against the ice, the puck was like a dark, inviting island, sat in a sea of a shiny forever. Seeing the puck right in front of him, Jerry absorbed it through his eyes. It entered his bloodstream, whacking his heart into high gear. Above the commotion, the little puck island called out Jerry's name. The wild rebound had thrown everyone off of their stride, but no one had any chance of reaching it. Jerry had gotten there first. Chapter 40. How many crystals? How many stars? Harman needed to do a somersault through shards of chair, at the same time twist and tear away at triple-thick layers of sinewy duct tape. He struggled to push his cuffed hands down under his feet, then to bring them up in front of him. Thin spindles of broken oak stuck out from his hair, giving him a pointy wooden crown. Other bits from the smashed old chair still clung to his clothing. Trying to think through the blue haze that the bang of his head to the floor had given him, that the whole ordeal had given him, and equally straining to fend off the runaway PA's metallic howl, Harman tried to focus his eyes. He'd take one more look before he would do something, though he wasn't sure what. Storm downstairs in his so curiously disheveled state? Manacled, like a medieval menace locked up in the palace tower? Door's locked, no doubt, he thought. Have to kick it down. That would be difficult. His ankles were still bound to the broken-off, stubby legs of the chair. These perversely premature splints would cause him to tumble and break his own legs had he tried to get down there. He again leant on the desk in front of the windows, looked at the scoreboard and clock. He could never read it outright either, though he knew from experience that the symbols meant there were only seconds to go in the third period. A flicker, a blur of a Riverview uniform directly below him brought his shackled hands up to his face. Soon as Jerry's skates met the ice, his legs buckled and he flopped on his belly as if he was body surfing a wave. "You have to take it," Jerry heard Nell tell him, remembering the note was like having her shout in both his ears. "It looks like somebody threw him," Martin said, gushing at the display. Tommy just gawked. He landed in front of the nearest Cheltenham player, who, expecting to scoop the puck first, whizzed right past, almost stepping on him, and raked Jerry over the back of his pants with his stick. Jerry slid, giving the puck a push out ahead of him with clenched gloves. Across the rink, Rob tried to jump the boards. Only Jill grabbing his arm kept him on his feet. "I'll kill Bob," Rob said, staring out at his son. Jill didn't speak, watched, squeezed Rob's arm all the tighter. "I can't believe it. Jerry's out. Rob, "Look at that," said Mr. Zloty, astonished, leaning over the boards. "Would you just look at that?" His voice was suddenly the loudest thing in the building. It echoed. The out-of-control PA had just cut out cold. Harman peeled a slippery patch of the sharkskin-like tape down to his chin. His lips bled. Out of the uncovered side of his mouth he yelled, "Go, Jerry! Take it in, boy! Take it in now!" "Damn, man! Jerry, go! Get up and go, man!" Tiny Jim squeaked before losing his voice entirely. "Get up, get up, get up!" The command was in Jerry's feet. He wasn't thinking this. He was the thought. Up on his skates. The puck was on his stick. Push, 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 push! The notion entered his being the same as snapping on a light. Striding in a straight line, he was skating faster than anyone ever told him that he could. The game was tied. 20 seconds were left before overtime. Why couldn't he wait? Why couldn't he just wait and play it safe? Only with 19, 18, 17 seconds to go, no one was asking that question, especially not Jerry. 15 seconds. 14. Jerry crossed the Cheltenham blue line and ducked a check in front of the bleachers, his opponent ramming the boards, gloves first, with a hollow thump. Jill and Rob, leaning hard into the same boards themselves, only yards from the action, could feel a tremor from the impact. "Jerry, for God's sake, watch it!" Rob screeched. Jerry rode his skates, felt weightless as a beam of light. His heart, soul, his top-to-bottom inside and out whole being was light, from his brain down to his swishing blades. 12 seconds. No one could catch him. He skated the length of the blue line, back towards the opposite boards, keeping the puck just onside. He nearly ran into Riley, who just looked at Jerry in wonder and backed out of the zone, out of his way. Jack cut Jerry's trance loose. "Jerry! Hey! Come on! Come on!" Jack called from the left corner, down on Jerry's right. Jerry flipped the puck on his backhand without looking. It was high. Jack punched the puck flat to the ice at his feet, wound it around the boards to Sonny, back behind the net. Jerry cut into the slot, hacked in the pants by a defenseman he could not see, so it stung all the way to the net. 7 seconds. Sonny took the puck on his stick. He made sure he had it, but good. He pushed off to his right, and Jerry thought he was going to try for a wraparound. But then he stopped. Tied game or no tied game. Overtime available or not. Jerry not open, but Jack all alone in the middle of the slot and calling for a pass like he was hailing the last cab out of holy hell. None of this mattered to Sonny. Like an archer, he sized up his trajectory, tilted his head, narrowed his gaze, and with 3 seconds to go, he let fly. Sonny swept a wrist shot that looked as if it would sail straight over the boards. Jack cursed. Harman, closed up in the booth, suddenly wished that Bob had blindfolded him too. The puck caught a double-peaked warp in the wood, sticking out like 2 tiny horns at the top of the boards, just an inch below the rim, exactly above the middle of the left face-off circle. Walsh found something magic that turned out to be not a crack at all. It rebounded off the boards with a tight, dull snap. The sound of an apple exploded by a baseball bat. The puck sprang from the boards, like the warped wood itself, and not Walsh's stick, not even the factory where the puck was made, was its place of origin. Facing the goalie, Jerry felt the defenseman shove him roughly from behind. In front of him, he felt the black puck give the black tape on his stick blade a fraternal split-second kiss. It was so fast that he was not sure if the memory of it or the fact of it happening came first. Both were jumbled into one. All that Jerry knew was that when the puck hit his stick, the tug he felt where his hands clenched the shaft was equal to the weight of a held pot of gold. Jerry saw the puck disappear under the goalie's skates. Teammates' voices overlapped, yelping, their hands and arms mixed together into a soft, pummeling wave, so that it was not possible to tell who was who. The wave of celebrating voyagers washed Jerry up on the shores of the crease. He was pinned to the ice. Looking up through a grapefruit-sized gap between Jack's underarm and Riley's beaming profile, Jerry could see the red goal light, shining so brightly in his eyes, it seemed to be making a siren's sound. Cleo was on his feet. He held his stopwatch high over his head, wagging it at the Cheltenham bench. Their scorekeeper grabbed Cleo by the wrist, bringing the timepiece down to his face, staring and staring at it. The watch was stubbornly halted at 19:59. He let go of Cleo's sweaty wrist, shook his head at no one, turned back to the ice. He etched the air with his chin in the direction of the wrung-out coach across the rink, standing with his arms and hands on head. The clock up on the malfunctioning board read the non-number L9:X9, which Cheltenham took for a legitimate confirmation of what had come to pass. They had played at Rip Rink often enough to know. Cheltenham trailed 4-3 with 1 second to go, and that was only if Bob could get his players back to the bench to set up the last perfunctory drop of the puck. Riding a current of home crowd, howls and claps, Riverview's boys had all rushed out onto the ice to mob Jerry. They'd won it. 1 unknowable second, be damned. Jerry heard his name pealing like a church bell from the mouths of teammates he could not discern. He was in the net now, the pile of voyagers pushing out in all directions around it, engulfing the iron and mesh. Cheltenham, led by its goalie, fled to its bench to relapse before Flaherty had finished his sprint to join the celebration. He piled on top of the backs of Riley and Vazzo, who were stuck to the top of Jack and Sonny, Jerry beneath them. Flaherty was hopelessly pancaked under the giant ball created by the rest of the Riverview bench. All right, let's get back to our places. Plenty of time for this. But let's get that last second off the clock, boys, okay? The ref said, adding to his linesman, that is a second left up there. Isn't it? Nobody listened, so nobody was confused over what he meant, except for goalie Jim, who at the bottom of the pile heard the ref plainly and began to laugh until he cried. Teddy juggled the key to his right hand and unlocked the door to the press box, opened it, and called upstairs gleefully, "Be there in a minute, buddy. Set you free." Ha! Teddy moved on to the timekeeper's booth, where Cleo unburdened him of the state trophy, nestled in his left arm. The hardware that was that night entrusted to Rip Rink for making its presentation at the end of the game. Another chore for Cleo, who turned towards the ice when he heard someone call his name. Second left?" asked the ref. Knowing the answer, Cleo held up his stopwatch in his other hand and nodded. Charles forced his round face down through the pile. It was becoming a bit looser now, with its outer rungs of celebrants peeling away, guys electing to hug one another one at a time before beginning to glide back over to the bench. It was a cherub's gloat that poked its way through the mound of uniforms to reach Jerry's face. "Like I told you already. Now you see," Charles said. "It's not you. It was never you. It was him." Him being Harman, whom everyone else seemed to have forgotten had ever been lord of the Voyagers' bench. Jerry smiled. He smiled with every atom of his body, like he had never smiled before. But he could not move. More Voyagers needed to be stripped from the reveling hive of boys before he could be able to do that. So, he thought. Then thought some more. Was it Harman, and not him? He had only been on the team for some weeks before he was hurt, not much time to establish himself, even had he been playing. But had he tried hard enough when he had the chance? He had no idea he was going to jump out there. He had surprised himself with that. Jerry did have a clear idea of one thing as he felt the weight lift off his body, the cracking plastic cocoon of his rising teammates' clustered helmets making him anew. Jerry would never let himself stay hooked to the bench again. That he scored did not matter. It made him feel as if he had dropped into someone else's dream. What gave Jerry back his heart was how he had made it back out onto the ice. No way would it have happened. No way would it have happened without Uncle Bob. His thoughts rushed down into his full heart. Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob. The last players, Jack and Riley and Sonny, had paired their bodies from the core of the pile-up, leaving Jerry to breathe free. His head resting on the edge of the crease, legs pointing out into the slot, Jerry took in the moment before getting back up on his skates. Tommy was at his feet, peering down on Jerry with all his teeth showing and his eyes back to their dark, sparkling best. He bent at the knee, offering Jerry a dipped glove in an exaggerated gesture. In helmet, and stick by his side like a lance, Tommy looked the part of a comic book knight. The referee's voice trailed over the top of him, coming from somewhere out at the red line, maybe. Jerry could not tell. "Still got a second to go, boys," the ref pleaded. Jerry could not see the ref, though he faced from ice level all the way down the length of the rink. Where'd he go? He thought. Trying to first sit up, bending at the waist, he reached out to take Tommy's glove. Tommy leant down closer to Jerry. "Bob's your uncle? What a trip. Come on, man. He's waiting for you. I'll help you up. What you waiting for, hero? Just grab hold of my glove." Tommy started to laugh. "Just grab hold of my glove. Come on, man." Jerry felt like he was sitting up and had taken Tommy's hand. He wasn't, and he hadn't. He was still lying flat on the ice, his arms motionless at his sides. And Jerry knew this. He knew it the same as he knew his name. He could not speak, but at Tommy's mention of his uncle, Jerry thought of how as soon as he got home, before he drank any hot chocolate or ate one donut sandwich, anything at all, he was going to strip Bob's picture from the wall. He was going to strip Bob's picture from the wall of the garage. He'd remove it from his place of dishonor and set it instead on a shelf, right in his room. And next to Bob's ill-fated college photo, he would put his new state championship trophy, that Jerry would rename the Lord Bob Cup. And that's where they'd both always be. But first, he had to get up. "Wake up, Jerry. You can't snooze," Tommy cheerily shouted. "We've still got to finish up. Just drop the puck one more time, then we get to jump you again. Don't clown. Get up, man. Come on, open your eyes, you goof." "My eyes aren't shut!" Jerry screamed. He blinked widely and slowly at Tommy to show him as much. When he unblinked a third time, Tommy disappeared. Jerry did lift his head from the ice, craned his neck, and still he could not see Tommy. Tommy, who had just been there. Jerry could not see another skater out on the rink. Not back on either bench. Anywhere. No one was standing on the other side of the boards. No crowd. Only empty stands. A white bird alone was perched on the scoreboard, picking at its wing with its beak. And the scoreboard was dark. Jerry wanted to shout for help. He still couldn't move his arms or legs, but his mouth stayed closed. All around him, everything he could see of the empty rink turned to black. Except for the ice itself, of which he noticed he was now a part of. Jerry could move again. He seemed to be sloshing in snow. Still flat on his back on the ice, Jerry slid his arms and legs over or was it through the ice? It was as if he was making a snow angel out in his backyard after a fresh fall. His uniform blended with the ice beneath and around him, so that he could not make out the difference between the two. It turned the ice to a faint black and yellow hue where he knew he was lying. It did not feel cold. Jerry thought of how it was just like having a hot bath at home. He was alone to his own eyes, but inside he was with them all. Tommy, his parents, Uncle Bob, Charles, Teddy, Diggett, and the red-eyed girl from the pond, Nurse Amy, Dr. Skelton, Klingendorfer, Mr. Silviano, and the whole rest of his team. Harman, too. And even Nell, who he thought he saw standing with Kate behind the wire above the backboards as he parked himself in front of the net just minutes before. Minutes that now seemed to be made up of a single second that wouldn't stop. The ice, which had been luminous as milk warming in the sun, was all but lost to an expanding, darkened canopy that draped itself over the rink. It was a midnight sky, but blank, with no moon and no stars. Jerry saw that his head was isolated by a still white patch of ice that remained. His unblackened sanctuary next expanded into the shape of a long box. It enclosed the rest of him and grew no larger. "My feet! What's happened to my feet?" Jerry whispered, and then screamed, though still sounding no louder than a whisper. "They're red! All red! What's happened to my feet? They're red!" Jerry's skates were a deep and glistening color, a sore and sickly ruby red. The toes shimmered together, two scaly red bulbs on the end of his upturned feet. Jerry tapped them together, as if trying to flick off the horrible stain, but it was already a part of them. A face descended from the void above him, huge, a shade of rotting green and mocking. The familiarity was no less frightening. A witch, the one killed in Oz. She glowered at his knocking skates, then she reared back, and her features vanished into the oral pool of her poisonous laugh. The vision was replaced by a sky-wide apparition of Nell's fierce face. In its force it was like an exploding cloud, but she spoke softly. "When I said take it, geez, Jerry, I didn't mean me," she said with the dagger of a giggle in her voice. "And you don't click your toes, dummy. You're supposed to use your heels. Don't you know anything? Go on now. See if you can." A ripple seemed to be at once absorbing the ice encasing Jerry, turning it red as if it were a snow cone daubed with a splash of cherry-flavored dye. Jerry shuffled his feet together through it all, fighting to stay on top. Slowly, he was sinking, and no longer like a bath. What he was slipping into was as cold as it should be. The ice resembled the guts of a watermelon, made up of a mercury-like pulp. It covered his face. It filled his nostrils with a freezing scarlet mush. Gasping, Jerry forced his head back above it, breaking through to the surface, unable to open his eyes. He shook his head hard, slinging frosted, rosy chips from his lids. Jerry kicked his skates together in a drowning frenzy. 1, 2, 3 times, and many more times than that. Indeed, wishing he was safe at home. Batting his eyelashes open, gulping for air, Jerry was desperate to see. And Jerry could see. Nell's specter was waiting. She greeted him, smaller but brighter than before. She was different, though, from what Jerry knew of her. Older, and no longer fierce. "But Jerry," she said, sadly, "you're still here." The left side of his face, then Jerry's whole head, was seized with the sensation of a cracking impact that set off bursting balls of lightning between his 2 ears and behind both his eyes. All went black, this time entirely, and he sank. Jerry descended, the same as a dead vessel falling through the sea. Jerry's fall was tranquil. Light returned. It became brighter and warmer the deeper he sank. Sights and sounds, feelings that he could somehow see, dredged from all that had happened to him since making Harman's team, passed before him on his way down, down, down. They slipped past, over and around Jerry like roving dolphins, crabs, wildly tinted tropical fish, and sea anemones. A kaleidoscope of life swam before him, but it was a non-abstract array, because the life's pageant was his own. It seemed a perpetual parade. Its duration would not be clocked. It sped by on what felt always to be his last breath. Still he sank, and when at last he landed, it was onto a narrow mattress cloaked in teal linen. Chrome bars on either side of the stretcher glittered the reflection of the overhead light all about the back of the ambulance, illuminating Jill's face as if by cold white candlelight. The ghostly ice, the phantasmic canopy of Nell's face, the red mush that filled the rink, with then all of everything spilling into the bottomless waters of Jerry's most recent past. They were gone. He still felt saturated, though. He had been knocked out cold when the Eastchester boy Armadillo Man sent his head smashing to the ice on a not-so-cold early November night at Rip Rink, that very hour. Jerry had come alive for seconds only upon being leveled into the ambulance, then passed back out. Jill gawked at him in terror. When he opened his eyes, his face a mask of living death. He lost consciousness, and her terror was redoubled when she realized that he may never wake again. As the ambulance pulled away from the rink, Jill pressed as close to the metal rim of the stretcher as she could, so close that her knees hurt, and the bottoms of her legs, all the way down to her feet and toes, fell asleep. She held Jerry's hands, soon fused to hers with his sticky, drying blood, the rest of the ride up to St. Thomas. With delicate cargo too risky to transport at top speed, the short journey was almost at its end. Jill jerked at Jerry's hands with both of her own. A crust of congealed blood, dark as a shaving of boiled beet, had rolled up from his lids as Jerry abruptly opened his eyes and looked into Jill's. The male attendant monitoring Jerry at Jill's side squeezed her around the shoulders. Just as startled as she, he stared the patient in the face. On the other side of the stretcher, the woman attendant said, "There, there, 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 there," over and again, like she had been expecting him to come back up. "There, there, there, there." Her voice was so low that it was hardly audible above the engine noise and rolling tires of the ambulance. Jerry squeezed his mother's palms with his thumbs. When he spoke, it was through a larynx, thick and dry, dropping his voice into the deep. Jill thought she now knew what he would sound like as a man. "Mom, don't worry. I'm okay. Tell Dad I'm okay," Jerry said. Jill saw his eyes looking back at her as if over the breakfast table on any morning. Jill creased her entire face with a wet smile. Her mascara drew 2 neat lines from her cheeks to beneath her jaw. She squeezed his hands tighter, tight as she was able to. The male attendant traded glances with his partner and began to shush Jerry down as delicately as he could. But Jerry kept on speaking, his voice rising and steady, like he had just arrived home from school and was asking his mother what she was making for supper. "Mom, tell somebody else something else for me," he said. Can you make sure you will?" Jerry looked to be about to sit straight up, and he raised his head. Light glanced off the white parts of his mostly rust-colored head-dressing. The ambulance slowed to take a sharp corner. The attendants and Jill together pitched towards Jerry slightly, leaning into the ambulance's long, smooth turn. One side of Jerry's blood-smeared mouth turned up. "Mom, make sure you tell Uncle Bob. Thanks a lot for me, will ya? Thanks a lot for being there. Don't forget." Jill couldn't answer him. Jerry's grip slackened, his gummy fingers came unstuck from Jill's hands, leaving a shadow of his swirling prints upon them. He fell back onto the pillow, piercing the woman ambulance attendant with a deep stare, and said, "Am I going to be okay?" And again, Jerry was sinking. Down and down further, all the way below the waters. He settled into the soft sand at the bottom of the brine of time. His time, the sea floor and infinity of grains of sand spilled from the cracked hourglass, counting every moment of his life, both forwards and back. Still he cries out in silence, through shut mouth, clamped eyes, and set face. "Yes, Mom, yes! Bob was there! Didn't you see? Didn't you see?" But no one had seen. Like with the hope he'd been living with, it was only something he was dying to have happen, but had not happened yet. The male attendant moved in professionally and pulled the blanket up around Jerry's chin, tucking it in. Jill reached around herself, holding her own arms tight, aiming unheard small talk at Jerry, who was wading in over his head into the coma promised him. The attendant said, Yeah, You are going to be okay, partner. You stay down now. We'll fix you up. We'll get you there. Just another minute. We'll fix you right up. Hush down now. Hush down. Hush down. He turned to Jill and continued the bedside chatter, not looking at her, and checked Jerry's pulse one last time before they reached the hospital. Your husband. So, he's got the boy's uncle with him, huh? The attendant said lightly, brightening his voice and facing Jill. That's good. Nights like these. On nights like these you need all the family you can get. Head back down, he continued to monitor Jerry's pulse. Jill did not react right away. She rested back in her seat, laying her hands on Jerry's covered, motionless knees. He doesn't live around here, she said, finally, gripping the silver guardrails that lined Jerry's stretcher. She continued, He doesn't live around here. His uncle wasn't at the game. The ambulance rolled up the steep hill to the hospital, siren off, its red light silently heralding the bodily gift of another soul to save. Splinter, a story about hockey, a boy, and a bench. Epilogue. Around and around and around. The coach would have liked to have told the woman outright. Instead, he simply smiled a smile as outwardly hollow as the woman's gaze was expectant. She was the mother of one of his charges, and she was expecting him to finish his story of a boy he once knew, and how that boy had been hurt badly, so it seemed in the telling badly enough to taste the afterlife, in a hockey game long, long before her son was even born. Sad, said the mother of his fastest skater, and she turned away. She refilled her glass from the punch bowl, walked off sipping, then stopped suddenly to speak to a fellow youth hockey parent's cocktail party acquaintance. Her moments with the coach had passed. His moment stayed stretched to the deep back then. The now an open tunnel. It runs straight through his brain. The ending? Sad? No. It's not even an ending. Not the final kind. His spirit was not whisked up to heaven. It's not that kind of an uplifting tale. But a happy ending? Lady, that's for you to decide, not for anyone else to tell you. Especially any coach. The puck pings off the glass behind the net, striking with the sound of a dulled and rusted bell that does not ring. The rink is not so old. The plexiglass, the best in the business, all the same. Coming off the glass, the puck hops straight onto a bantam boy's stick. The Riverview forward's eyes balloon at the sight of it. His fishbowl face shield places a glaze over his exposed expression. His pop-eyed expression mirrors that of a transparent face, as clean and glaring as the glass it watches through from behind the net. Back at the bench, the boys hoot as a single animal and rise to their skate blades when the puck lands in the back of the cage, beaming out in red electric letters and numbers as sharp as the edge of a slate. The scoreboard reads, Riverview 1, Visitors 0. One boy sits down first, as the others remain on their feet to jostle at the returning comrades back over at the bench to make a change. The next set swing legs over the boards on the nod from the coach, who manages a crinkled grin. Blue eyes alight let his players know it's not a misplaced grimace. After all, his team just took the lead. Kids lean out from the bench, reaching right into the rink. They bang sticks not made of wood back against the smooth white boards, making sounds that still duplicate what the observer's ears have forever known. At this rink, at others, at a rink now no more. Coach! 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 Says the boy. The boy who sits as if he owned but was paying a high and heavy mortgage on the knots of wood below his backside tugs with one hand up at the coach's coat. Holding his unworn gloves in his other hand, his stick rests at his side. The man meets the boy's eyes with a nod that casts a double-chin skin crease of a second smile down to the open face behind the plastic mask. "Coach, you think I can now? You think so, Coach? You think I can now? You think so?" The boy pleads in breath that is muffled behind his face shield and squashed to a mime by his still hollering teammates. His eager features are laid bare, not having broken a sweat, not needing to gulp for air. The protective casing of the sitting boy's shield is fog-free. "You think I can go out, huh? Maybe just get a shift? Get to play, Coach? You think I can go out, huh? Get to play, huh, Coach? Get to play, Coach?" His coach scans the bench. Above his top chin he frowns. "Change him up!" he cries, and the boy slides down the bench. Dejected, the boy is next distracted, and he sits up straight. Something faint reflects in his face shield. Something alien whispers in his ears. "Burn bright! Burn bright!" He thinks he hears it say. "Burn bright! Burn bright!" Then he thinks there was nothing there at all.